Alright, you want to do Oracle? Alright, let's do this. So first thing is to count them 3 at a time to understand which waves are what. It's also good to know that boss waves are at 5, 12, and 18, so you have a reference point on when certain things are going to happen. So it's always good, especially if you're preparing with a group that maybe doesn't have a lot of high DPS. You want to count out the waves and let everyone know which waves have what. And also remember, Laliburi can spawn on either card 2 or 3, and that affects her positioning. If you need to put something down like a hell plant or jellyfish from Slayer, like something ahead of time to kind of help pull her to your safe spot, which I'm going to talk about later. We did get an Ox Laliburi, but luckily for us, it was on the last wave. So first thing is Lightning Rod. Lightning Rod is pretty easy to take care of. It's really just healing. In Nightmare mode, it will continuously ping the group, so you just need consistent heals. Doesn't really matter from what job. Thing is Sand. Remember on Sand, if you have something that has a cast time, it will get a cast time. Also, I highly recommend, I don't know how many people know this, but you could check the weather icon on the minimap to see when sand goes away. If you do not have the visual, if your visuals are down, you can always just check the minimap. When it comes to ice, you could just stand on the outside ring. It's kind of a reference point. I am actually immune to freeze basically 99% of the time, but just out of habit, I always move out of the way. When you prep for bosses, bosses always spawn in the same spot, so you can always go to about the 1 to 3 o'clock part of the map and prepare for that. You know, start putting stuff ahead of time, and just annihilate the boss as quickly as possible. If you're someone that is not freeze immune or resistant, I always recommend, especially if you don't know what's coming after the waves, to stand on the outside. So this is our first Laliburi. So I'm going to talk about preparation. Go to the carpet. Go to the carpet. Walk against the wall. I always say, just walk against the wall. You don't need a chat room. You just need to be stacked on top of each other. You could tell by the HP bars how we're stacking. In this group in particular, Deathkin and Kuyori are not in the group, but you're going to see throughout several of the Laliburis in this instance how we handle them. In this one, she did pull to the main group. She did not stay up there because of her spawn point. Always remember, you need physical and magical DPS to take care of Laliburi really, really quickly. She swaps between being immune from one to the other. That is also why she's kind of a pain if you don't have a mixed DPS group. In this case, we handled it, you know, pretty fine. Lightning Rod was coming, so it's kind of tricky. You know, basically your healers just has to be prepared for when this is happening. You can move away once you see the visuals go away. If you have visuals off, there are red rings on the floor that show you the rings are gone. And then you can move and then you're not bumping each other anymore. So please keep that in mind. Lightning Rod again. Here we have our first Ox coming on up. If you do not have stun resistance, and you are doing the play dead trick, you have to do it 2 seconds before to have basically enough time to not be stunned at the end of the next wave. 2 seconds is really the prime time if you're going to do that. Anyone that has 100% stun resist can kite the Oxes around because they won't be stunned by them. They do damage. If I kind of tank them every once in a while, I have a lot following me here. So I'm kind of trying to avoid them. We have a Laliburi on the next wave, which is also a huge pain. You can see a few of us just kind of kiting them around. If you keep moving, you should be fine. If you kind of time it, once you see the 5-second timer, like I'm kind of trying to do like a last circle by the group, and I'm just walking against the wall immediately. In this Laliburi, it looks like it sticks to Deathkin and Kuyori here. So basically Laliburi doesn't see our big group in the corner. So because of that, that's why she doesn't pull. I'm also going to use an example of this later on after this run is done in a separate clip. We have the boss again. One thing I want to point out is the time watch in this wave. Ox is coming up. What's happening here is you kind of got to prep for Ox, and there is no timer. No timer is going to happen for you to prep for the 2 seconds. And here it is. Always be mindful of all the debuffs in Nightmare Oracle. I mean, a lot of people talk about Laliburi, a lot of people talk about Ox. Meteors are also a pain. We're fortunate to not have meteors in this week. But Time Watch is also a huge pain. The other one that's also a huge pain is the poison one, which didn't seem to be an issue this week as well. Laliburi is also next again. So here's the timer, kind of doing a few last spins and rushing. Walk against the wall. Walk against the wall like you see me doing here. She seems to be sticking to Deathkin again this time. We have a tornado coming up. Oh, she did pull here for a second. Watch out for these rings. You can see I moved out a little early, and that's why I got stuttered. So let's talk about tornadoes. Stop running them around. You just kind of need a loose stack for your healers to tap you off. You should have enough HP to survive tornadoes. Realistically, like if you're doing Nightmare. Especially your 4th job, you should be perfectly fine. We just have a normal wave here. Here we're gonna prep for Laliburi again. You see I just kind of continuously move my mouse to the left side to make sure I am walked against the wall. We don't use chat rooms in any part of this run. And this is an example of everyone stacking. Everyone's stacking. If you don't have the stun resist, sometimes you can still get a bit of a stutter, but the most important thing is not being bumped across the room. You can see our HP bars are perfectly stacked, and you can see those red HP bars of the rings as well. We got boss. This boss also has the time watch. This is important because sand is coming up, so sand is going to come up really fast, and you don't know exactly when. Make sure to turn off your autos. You can only cast spells that are considered actually instant. Yeah, so here I wanted to point out that because there's no timer, and sand just happens. On my screen this time you see the visual, but just look at the minimap. And now we have the last wave. We got our Ox Loli Ruri. We didn't really prep for this one since it was the last wave. If you have Ox on the last wave, whatever mobs you have, as soon as you kill the mobs, the wave is done. The Oxes will despawn. You don't have to wait out the like 30 seconds or whatever the wave is supposed to be. So you could just kind of bum rush the last wave if Ox is on it. Here we have our second run, which this was just after the first run that we ran this. Loli, Ruri, and Rod are in the very first wave, so we prepped up ahead of time. If you're dealing with that, sometimes it just happens. Next wave was also Rod Ox. If this is happening, Rod, tornadoes, and the poison debuff, you cannot play dead on these waves because you'll be interrupted from your play dead and end up standing up. So you kind of just have to deal with them. You have to kite them around as best as possible. And then we had Laliburi immediately after, along with the time watch. This run had everything kind of stacked up almost at the very beginning. So kind of doing our best here, stacking up. He was kind of bumping between us, between our carpet spot and the bottom. Here I'm jumping over to the next Ox wave. And just as an example. I was actually seeing if someone had the Archangeling debuff here. Also remember, if you have Archangeling, you gotta check if you have the Broken Heart on your head. Use First Aid to remove it. for whatever reason, they were all stacked on one person. I tried to save him. And then they split up after he had died. The next wave was also another rod, which kind of sucked, but it was fine. This is fine. So here we have Laliburi and Sand in the same wave. So here's a good example of priorities. Just gonna try to solo Laliburi. If you don't have a hard DPS, I'd recommend everyone go to kind of like the 5 o'clock side. I also messed up here, casting heal right on the timer. I tried to get it off before the 5 seconds. Now the problem that happened here is she was not dead yet, and a few of us moved too early. Because we moved too early, she started putting the circles everywhere, people were bumped, and of course stuttered. The other thing to keep in mind is sometimes, like, let's say you start hitting her or you think you finally got to her, she has a teleport. So you think once you got her in your sights, she pieces out. And this instance, because of the mistake that happened, she's actually alive for a little while. And that's why it's so important to just stack on top of each other. Also, if you have something like meteors as another example, try and stay on the far right-hand side. You can move as a group, like you can go between, let's say, like 3 o'clock and 6 o'clock in the circle, back and forth to control the meteors. Is a really good other example of controlling a different debuff. And there she goes, she's finally down. Here we have another setup of Loli Ruri coming on up. Most of us move to the red. And it goes pretty smooth. She does walk to us, but it's not too much of a big deal since not much was happening in this wave. But Ox is next. There's a lot of back and forth on this run. So remember, Ox's spawn, just gotta run, just gotta run. If you have to, just kite out the whole wave and then just, you know, prep for the next wave once that happens. But otherwise, you should be able to get Nightmare done pretty much every time. You just need some mix of DPS and control and coordination. If you have to, communicate on Discord. You know, you should be able to get it done every time. Good luck, everybody.